Hey everybody, I'm Fox with Foxio Games, and this is the PlayStation Vita. First released in Japan in 2011, most of the rest of the world got their hands on the system in 2012. While the system is officially still supported by Sony, the PS Vita has been portrayed as a dying system barely clinging to life. It's often the butt of jokes where it's implied or even directly stated that there are simply no games for the system. The popular Mega64 YouTube channel had a video in which they jokingly mocked the Vita as not having any games in which to feature a Best Vita category for their awards.
Best Vita game!
Austin Evans released a video recently asking, why does the PS Vita exist in 2017? As if it was supposed to completely disappear and we were all supposed to destroy our PS Vitas.
Hey guys, this is Austin. This is a PlayStation Vita, and against all odds, it still exists in 2017. But why? So let's take a look to see.
The YouTube show Extra Credits declared the Vita a failure. But then again, Extra Credits isn't exactly a pro gamer or even pro video games site now, is it? Regardless, my point is that many people have maligned the system as failed or failing. And time again, we hear the tired refrain that the Vita has no games. I'm here to tell you that's the furthest thing from the truth. The PlayStation Vita is an incredible system with a large library of awesome games, and it has quickly become my favorite handheld gaming system of all time. Let's take a look at why. The PS Vita hardware is actually quite impressive. This is, in my opinion, the ultimate gaming handheld, rivaling that of even the Nintendo 3DS, Android systems like the NVIDIA Shield, and of course, mobile phones. No, it isn't the most powerful anymore, since smartphones just keep advancing, but it's a solid gaming platform that offers physical and touch controls that smartphones just can't compete with. Ever try playing a platformer with on-screen touch controls? Yeah, it sucks. You know it does. The Vita released with incredible specs and features. It has an elongated oval shape that fits well in the hands and features most of the controls found on a PlayStation DualShock controller. This includes standard PlayStation D-pad, dual analog sticks, L and R shoulder buttons, square, triangle, X, and circle face buttons, start and select, a PS home button, smartphone-like OLED touchscreen, and even a rear touchpad on the back. Compared to a DualShock controller, it only lacks the R2, L2, R3, and R3 buttons, although these can be somewhat compensated for by the touchscreen and rear touchpad. By the way, the L3 and R3 are when you click down on the analog sticks, just in case you didn't know that. The Vita has a microphone as well as both forward and rear-facing cameras, which I could not possibly care less about. They're not great, but whatever, who cares, right? I don't take photos with my Vita. I have a smartphone with a much better camera for that. On the top of the system is the power button, a slot for inserting a Vita game cartridge, an accessory port, and volume up and down buttons. In the updated model, this accessory port was removed, since as far as I'm aware, it was never used for anything outside of Japan. On the bottom is a proprietary power connection, headphone jack, and proprietary memory card slot. The updated model replaced the proprietary power connector with a standard micro USB port, which is much better, obviously. The only drawback is that the micro USB port can wear down over time, but that's true of all such ports. Thankfully, if you have the updated system, you can just use the same charger you use with your Android smartphone, your Kindle reading tablet, or your other various micro USB devices. Unfortunately, I couldn't get either model of the Vita to charge when plugging the USB cable directly into my PC. I tried other micro USB cables with no success. I'm not sure what was going on there, but you guys can let me know about your efforts to do that in the comment section below. The Vita has stereo speakers, and while I'm not an audio expert, they do sound pretty good to me. If you want the best audio, you'll opt for a good pair of headphones. Oh, and yes, the Vita even has 6-axis motion control, which some games do make use of. There's a SIM card slot on the side for those with the 3G model, but I've never used it, and I think it's pretty much useless. I mean, the Vita has 802.11bgn Wi-Fi support, which means that the newest standard it supports is N, so that's pretty good, but is also compatible with B and G standards. Now, some people did get the 3G model because they wanted to use the wireless 3G connection on the go, but honestly, at the time, it wasn't really up to specs for playing online gaming, for the most part, and you wouldn't want to download any huge files like games over the 3G, so I don't know if 3G is still supported. I've never messed with it, and I don't recommend it. So, what all changed with the updated model, known as the PS Vita Slim or the PS Vita 2000? As mentioned, the proprietary power port was changed to a micro USB, and the accessory port has been removed from the top of the system. Additionally, the system is 15% lighter and 20% thinner, and now features a less expensive LCD screen in place of the original's amazing OLED screen. Honestly, while the OLED is incredibly nice and one of the best screens on a handheld system I've ever seen, the newer model's LCD is still great. You won't feel like you're missing out, in my opinion, although others may tell you differently. Personally, I say it is not worth hunting down an original model just for the OLED screen, but if that's important to you, go for it. Also, I'm told that over time, OLED screens can wear down in a way that LCDs do not. I'm not sure how true that is, as it's never happened to me, and my original PlayStation Vita screen still looks great. The newer model features approximately 1 extra hour of battery life and features 1 GB of internal storage. Unfortunately, the internal storage cannot be combined with your memory card. You either use the 1 GB of internal storage by itself, or you use the memory card by itself. I don't know why, but they don't allow you to use both. This is a huge drawback, as the memory cards are ridiculously expensive, and that 1 extra gig would come in handy for most users. And finally, the new model has the streamlined look and feel that you now recognize as the PS Vita, eliminating some of the edge design in favor of more compact and consistent look. There were a few other changes to things such as the start and select button and the edges of the model, but overall it still pretty much looks and feels mostly the same, although it is more compact and lighter. Some people like the new look better, and some prefer the older one. I actually prefer the new look myself. Like I said, the downgrade to an LCD screen is nothing to worry about and shouldn't greatly influence your decision in which model to buy. I recommend the newer Slim model for its smaller size, lighter weight, improved battery life, and micro USB charging port. Both systems include in the box a USB charging cable with wall adapter. This makes it possible to use the same cable to charge it from a USB source as well as from the wall, so that's pretty useful. There is a third model of the PlayStation Vita called the PSTV, which is a home console version of the system designed to be used with an external display and a DualShock 3 or 4 controller. I'll be reviewing that system separately at a later date. The Vita has been released in a variety of colors depending on the model and region of the system. All PS Vitas are region-free, so you can grab one of the cool colors from Japan and just switch the language to English. Do note that a few games will auto-detect your PS Vita's original region and remap the X and circle buttons. The max screen brightness is excellent and should be okay for most reasonable outdoor usage. People often talk about playing in direct sunlight when they discuss handheld gaming systems' screens, although honestly, I can't imagine why anyone would be doing that. I mean, seriously, who sits outside in the direct bright sun and plays a game system? The Vita's hardware controls are excellent, particularly when you take into account that it's a handheld and not a home console system. It can never compete with a DualShock controller, but the system fits fairly well in the hand and is not overly uncomfortable for extended playing sessions. Of course, as with any portable system, long-term play may cause some people to get hand cramps, particularly if you're using both analog sticks in the game. The D-pad is excellent and feels like a compact version of what you find on the standard PlayStation controller. The 4 face buttons feel great, as do the 2 shoulder buttons. The analog sticks are some of the best I've used on a handheld, rivaled only by the much larger and heavier NVIDIA Shield. My hands do start to cramp a little with extended play using the analog sticks, but for games that primarily use the D-pad, it's not such an issue. The touchscreen feels similar to a quality smartphone and is just as responsive. I have a glass screen protector on my system, which I highly recommend. It not only protects the screen, but it maintains the look and feel of the screen. Other screen protectors often make it obvious that a piece of plastic is sitting on top of the screen, and they change the feel of the screen when you're touching it as well. The Vita screen resolution is 960 by 544, which is a quarter of full 1080p. While it may sound like a low resolution, it doesn't look like it when you're playing games on the system's 5-inch screen. The game cartridges are similar to DS or 3DS games, although they are thinner and lighter. Inserting a cartridge into the system is not difficult overall, but it can be a bit finicky at times. I found myself having to push cartridges down with my thumbnail to get them to click into place. I've never been unable to do it, it just feels, like I said, a bit finicky. Removing them is sometimes a bit tough, but nothing major. It's not like I've ever felt like I was going to break the cartridge. It just felt like it took a little more force than it should have. The cartridges come in these nice yet small blue cases, and for some odd reason I just really like them. Unfortunately, many Vita titles don't have a physical release and must be downloaded from the online store. And this becomes a big issue when you're running out of storage space. And this leads to our discussion of one of the biggest negatives with the Vita, the proprietary memory cards. As of the release of this video, there is no alternative to Sony's PS Vita memory card, and no one has come up with a converter or other solution. The cards come in 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64GB sizes, although the 64GB size was only released in Japan. Don't worry, it's totally compatible with any region Vita, so if you can find it, it'll work, and it is actually the one I bought. Unfortunately, these cards are absurdly, ridiculously expensive. At the time of writing this, Amazon has the 4GB card listed at $19, the 8GB at $38, and the 16GB is on sale at $45. Obviously, the 8GB would be a giant ripoff compared to the 16GB on sale. The 32GB is $67, and the 64GB is around $100. To emphasize just how overpriced these cards are, let's compare them to equivalent SD cards. The 16GB Sony card is $45 on sale. A regularly priced 16GB SD card can be found for less than $10. That means the 16GB proprietary Sony card on sale is over 4 times more expensive than a standard SD card and is virtually identical in many ways. A 64GB SD card can be found for around $20. The 64GB Vita memory card is over $100. So that's ridiculous. Beyond ridiculous. I mean, we're talking 4-5 times as much as it should cost. It's frustrating and costly, but I don't recommend buying anything less than a 16GB card. There are just too many great downloadable titles for the Vita to let a low storage card prevent you from enjoying them. Bite the bullet and just buy a 32 or even a 64GB card if you can afford it. Just plan ahead of time when considering purchasing a Vita. Another drawback to the Vita are the download speeds. All of Sony's systems have long been plagued with horribly slow download speeds, but the Vita is even slower than the PS3 or PS4. Being an avid PC gamer, I'm used to seeing my games download at 5 to 10 megabytes per second on Steam. With the Vita, downloading at 1 megabyte a second is about as good as it gets for me, with intermittent slowdowns to be expected. With the PSP, you could download games on the PS3 and then transfer them over via USB cable. This is no longer an option for the Vita. Sony has dispensed with the PS3 and PSP's cross-media bar operating system in favor of one that accommodates the PS Vita's touchscreen controls. While you can interact with the PS Vita using the hardware buttons, the interface is designed much more like a smartphone, with mostly intuitive touch controls. You can swipe up and down for different pages of apps and games. You can tap on bubble icons to launch those games and apps as well. Tap and hold to enter a customization mode where you can make more pages, move apps and games around as you prefer, and change the background for each page. In the upper right corner are your notifications, and at the top of the screen is a status bar with icons denoting such things as current time, battery power, Wi-Fi connection, and whether a PS Vita game cartridge is inserted. The battery indicator is not as precise as it appears and moves in large chunks, unfortunately. To close an app or game, you hit the PlayStation Home button, then swipe it away from corner to corner as if turning a page. You can swipe to the side to see currently active apps and games, although you can generally only run one at a time. You can, however, exit a currently running game to access the operating system and perform a few basic functions. Some actions require closing any open games when it seems like it shouldn't, such as checking your messages or friend requests. This isn't really a big deal, but do take note that the PS Vita's operating system isn't designed around multitasking. Fortunately, you have quick access to some important features. Instead of just pressing the PlayStation Home button, hold it down to access a shortcuts menu that allows you to turn on or off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, change the screen brightness, control music playback and volume, disable and enable the microphone, and to prioritize chat audio for party chat. This menu is accessible at nearly any time, including in-game. I mainly use this menu to change the screen brightness, and you probably will too. You can access the PlayStation Store with a dedicated app, although I'm not a fan of the interface for it. I think it's the least intuitive way to browse the store, and I prefer to just use a web browser and buy games on that, then download them later using the Vita's download list feature. A content manager app lets you see how you're using your Vita storage, or rather, your memory card storage. You can copy and transfer content, create a backup and restore from backup, delete games, apps, and files, and download content from your PlayStation Plus account. There's an app to browse your trophies, but I really don't care and have never used it. I don't care about trophies in the least bit. There are apps for calendar, email, web browser, photos, music, and video, but again, I've never bothered with them. I highly doubt you'll be using your Vita for any of that stuff when you have a smartphone that can do it all better. As I mentioned, you can access your messages and friends list, as well as send and receive messages and send and receive friend requests with a dedicated app. In the Settings app, we find the settings. Makes sense. You can turn on flight mode to disable any wireless signal so you can use it on a plane, even though they'll still probably tell you to put it away for takeoff and landing. Check for system updates, set up and test your Wi-Fi connections, make changes to your PlayStation account, set up Bluetooth devices or external keyboards. Wow. That's really taking it to the next level. Hooking up an external keyboard to your PlayStation Vita. You can change notification settings, alter the screen brightness, turn off the background music that plays in the basic operating system, change your themes and backgrounds, enable or disable use of location data, and here's an interesting one. You can lock the system with a 4-digit PIN, just in case you're worried about intruders messing with your game system. It won't stop them from stealing the Vita outright, obviously, but this could be very useful for adults with children or those with siblings who might unintentionally or even intentionally delete or otherwise mess with your games. Moving on, you can set the date and time, change the system language, change some accessibility options including remapping buttons, look at your system info including your MAC address if you're interested in that, and your software version, set whether you can use the hardware buttons to control the system interface, and you should set this to yes, enable or disable USB power supply, which I did, although it still doesn't charge when I connect it to my computer, and view a history of errors on the system. Unfortunately, just like with the PS4, you can only remap buttons on a system-wide level. You cannot remap the controls on a per-game basis. Bummer. There's an app called Near, which appears to be similar to Nintendo's Street Pass or Mi Plaza in some ways. It's not the kind of thing that interests me, and I've never actually used it myself, so try it if you want to. You can connect your Vita to Twitter, but Facebook support has been dropped. There are some other apps available on the PlayStation Store, such as Netflix, but again, not to sound like a broken record, I don't use my Vita for such things, and I don't think most people do either. A really neat feature is that the PS Vita is great at entering rest mode and saving your game state. I put the PS Vita into rest mode in the middle of a dungeon on Dragon's Crown, and I didn't turn the system back on fully until the next day. I was able to immediately jump back into the game like nothing ever happened. Really cool feature for a handheld, since you're likely to be putting games down and picking them up frequently when out and about. One very awesome yet overlooked feature of the Vita is Remote Play. Remote Play allows you to play almost any PS4 game on your Vita using a wireless connection to your PS4, or even via the internet if both your present and home connections are fast enough. You can wake your PS4 from rest mode via the PS Vita and then use it to control the PS4's interface, including launching games. You can launch any downloaded PS4 games as well as the game disc currently inside the machine. If you want to launch another game that's on a disc, you obviously need to swap the discs in the PS4 itself, which you, again, obviously can't do if you're not there with the system. I used Remote Play for extended play sessions of several games, including Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age, Neo, and Bloodborne. All three worked amazingly well. I was shocked at just how well I was able to adapt to using the touchscreen controls for the R2, L2, and R3, L3 buttons. I actually made it all the way to the Gascoigne boss fight in Bloodborne before I died, and I came really close to winning that encounter. I was using the Hunter's Axe and made extensive use of the R2 attack via the touchscreen, and while not an ideal control method, it worked surprisingly well. Neo is similar to Bloodborne in that it requires very precise and accurate control, and that game worked great too. I was approximately 30 feet from my PlayStation 4 with two walls separating my PS Vita and the PS4 system itself, and I was able to play Neo at a near flawless 60 frames per second for an extended period of time. I saw two very brief stutters, but that was all. Bloodborne never stuttered once, although that does play at 30 FPS max. Remote Play isn't perfect, however. You cannot customize the controls unless the game developer has specifically coded that option into their game, and I haven't found a single one that has yet. This means that the default touchscreen setup is all you get. There's no reason Sony can't provide us with a universal remapping feature for this, but they haven't by this point, so they probably never will. While Remote Play technically works for the PS3, I couldn't find a single actual PS3 game that worked with it. You can play original PlayStation games downloaded from the PS Store, as well as PS1 discs inserted into the system. Remote play will not work for any PS4 titles that require special peripherals, such as the PlayStation Move or PlayStation Eye. The application to connect to a PS3 is called PS3 Remote Play, while the equivalent app for the PS4 is labeled PS4 Link. This is a language consistency issue, as it should be called PS4 Remote Play. Two more great features of the PS Vita that go hand in hand are cross-buy and cross-play. Cross-buy compatible games allow you to buy a game on one system and play it on another for no additional cost. This means that you may already own several Vita titles and not even know it. If you purchase any cross-buy enabled games on your PS3 or PS4, you can download the game for free on your PlayStation Vita. Most cross-buy games also feature crossplay, allowing you to continue playing from one system to the next. You can upload your save data to your PlayStation account from your PS3 or PS4, then download it and continue playing it on your Vita or vice versa. I've been progressing through Dragon's Crown on both the PlayStation 3 and the PS Vita. Not all cross-platform games include cross-play, and unfortunately not all cross-play games include cross-buy. Both Dragon's Crown and Odinsphere Lifthrasir include cross-play, but neither are cross-buy, so that means to play it on both systems that you have to buy a copy for each system you play it on. Bummer, I know, but think of cross-buy as a bonus, and never just assume it's available for a title without doing a little research first. The PS Vita has a stellar, amazing library of games. As I mentioned, the biggest myth that won't die is that the Vita has no games. There are options from all kinds of genres, including first-person shooters, JRPGs, tactical RPGs, visual novels, fighting games, Monster Hunter clones, racing games, sports games, third-person action games, platformers, point-and-click adventures, puzzle games, and more. The Vita also has some remasters of older games, including, but not limited to, Muramasa Rebirth, Odinsphere Lifthrasir, Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, Persona 4 Golden, and Final Fantasy X 10-2 HD. The Vita also has a large library of indie titles, and indie developers continue to support the system to this day. Of considerable note is that the PS Vita is backwards compatible with most PSP and PS1 games that are available on the PlayStation Store. The PS Vita obviously cannot play PSP UMD discs because, there's no way they would put a UMD disk drive in the Vita just to be backwards compatible. If you've never owned a PSP, this unlocks a large library of games you've likely never played. And even if you did own a PSP, it means that many games will play on your PS Vita, although you'll need the downloadable version for that. If you already purchased a compatible PSP game on the PlayStation Store, you can download and play it on your Vita without any additional charge. This also includes any PS1 Classic games as well. Now, to help convince you of the Vita's considerable library of quality titles, contrary to what people are claiming, I'll be showcasing a host of games that I personally think are worth showing for one reason or another. This isn't a list of the best games on the system, nor is it even a list of the games that I particularly like. I picked these games as a way to showcase what the Vita has to offer, and they are games that I happen to have played. For convenience, I've either used the PS TV to capture footage, or I've captured footage of the PC version of the game, simply because it's so much easier for me to capture footage that way. I'll notate on the screen when the PC version is being shown. So, get ready. We're going to quickly shoot through a bunch of games with some footage. At the top will be text denoting the name of the game, and whether or not it's a Vita exclusive, and at the bottom, I'll tell you where the gameplay footage came from. Freedom Wars, an awesome Monster Hunter-style mission-based action game with guns and a unique Thorn weapon system. Lots of stuff to unlock, but the story and characters could be better. Dragon's Crown. Beautiful hand-drawn art, great music and narration, awesome beat-em-up gameplay with RPG elements. Makes excellent use of the Vita's touchscreen. Drive Girls. A somewhat repetitive third-person action game akin to Dynasty Warriors. Slightly hard to control, but has tons of customization and a unique car transformation feature for the girls featured in the game. Claudun, This is Sengoku. Surprisingly engrossing and entertaining action RPG with loads of customization. Has a high difficulty curve, and the charming graphics are a bit too simplistic. Oreshika, Tainted Bloodlines. Interesting character procreation system with lots of RPG dungeon crawling and turn-based combat. Mediocre graphics and animation are a drawback. Muramasa Rebirth. Similar to Dragon's Crown with an amazing Japanese aesthetic and 2 characters with unique storylines. Original game was on the Wii, but this remaster is exclusive to the Vita. Phantasy Star Nova. Mission-based action RPG combat with a unique world. Can get repetitive at times. Soul Sacrifice. Unique skill combining combat coupled with a dark yet deep story and incredible narration. Controls can be cumbersome at times. Tolkien, Age of Demons. A Monster Hunter-like mission-based game with online capability, and there's a sequel as well. Odin Sphere Life Thrasir. A side-scrolling beat-em-up from the developers of Dragon's Crown and Muramasa has a totally different but amazing aesthetic and story and features 5 characters with their own stories and gameplay styles. Combat has been streamlined and updated to be more intuitive than the original game. Guacamelee. FUD side-scrolling Metroidvania-style game with tight controls and an interesting aesthetic and story. Valhalla Knights 3. An action RPG that mimics one you might find on home consoles. Includes some erotic elements for mature audiences. Tearaway. A fun and quirky game with a paper art aesthetic that makes extensive use of both the Vita's touchscreen and rear touchpad. Terraria. Lauded as a 2D side-scrolling Minecraft, Terraria, or as I like to call it, Terraria, is about resource collection and building with combat elements. Child of Light. Beautiful hand-drawn art complements this side-scrolling turn-based RPG with a deep story. The physical release of the game is exclusive to the Vita. Little Big Planet Vita. The well-known Little Big Planet experience, but now on the Vita with added touchscreen elements. Touch My Katamari. This entry in the beloved Katamari series utilizes the touchscreen for moving your ever-growing Katamari around. You can also use the analog sticks if you'd prefer traditional controls. Rogue Legacy. The game that defined the term roguelite, it's a permadeath platformer with progression that carries over from one playthrough to the next. Volgar the Viking. A hardcore action platformer that doesn't relent. Fans of challenging old-school style arcade games will like this one. Shovel Knight. An amazingly good retro-styled platformer that is held in the highest regard by fans of the genre. Has amazing music. Nidhogg. Simple yet surprisingly deep gameplay in this swordplay platformer with somewhat simple art. Binding of Isaac. A roguelike twin-stick shooter with randomized levels and power-ups. Many people love this game, and as do I. Killzone Mercenary. A solid entry in the beloved first-person shooter series. Its only real drawback is that a handheld is never ideal for first-person shooters. Still a fun experience and looks amazing. Axiom Verge. A Metroid-inspired platformer with lots of power-ups, an interconnected world, and a unique alien aesthetic. Spelunky. A fun cave-diving platformer with randomized levels and a focus on treasure collection. Titan Souls. A 2D pixel art game with a unique combat mechanic that focuses on very challenging boss encounters. Darkest Dungeon. A unique, complicated, and highly challenging 2D dungeon crawler with numerous factors to manage. It is a bit too complex for my tastes. Well, I'd love to keep showing games, and I definitely could, but I have to stop somewhere. There are plenty more I could show you, but instead, we'll rattle off a list of just some of the additional games available for the Vita. In no particular order, here we go. Bastion, Minecraft, Don't Starve, Limbo, Borderlands 2, Octodad, Thomas Was Alone, Fez, Hatoful Boyfriend, Joe Danger, Ali Ali, Aqua Kitty, Milk Mine Defender DX, TXK, which is actually the successor to Tempest 2000 from the Atari Jaguar, The Swapper, Hotline Miami, SteamWorld Dig, La Mulana X, Oddworld, Stranger's Wrath, Wipeout 2048, Uncharted, Golden Abyss, Lost Dimension, Dragon Quest Builders, Danganronpa, Trigger Happy Havoc, Sound Shapes, Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward, Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, Gravity Rush, Severed, Luminous, Mortal Kombat, Dungeon Hunter Alliance, Batman Arkham Origins, Lego Marvel Superheroes, Rayman Origin, Resistance Burning Skies, Unit 13, The Walking Dead, the Seiran Kagura series, Shantae Half Genie Hero, the Ys series, Crypta the Necrodancer, Ninja Gaiden Sigma, Persona 4 Golden, and the list could go on and on. Not including PS1 and PSP classics from the PlayStation Store, there are well over 1,300 titles for the Vita, and possibly more at this point. More are being released regularly, though, of course, AAA development has slowed significantly, nearly to a crawl, so expect most of those to be from niche developers of Japanese titles, as well as indies. Now, like any other gaming system, the PS Vita has its pros and its cons, so before we wrap up the video, let's hit on them briefly. Pros. It has a stellar game library. It has powerful hardware for a handheld. It has great controls. It has PS4 remote play. The capacitive touchscreen controls are great and can be used well in some games. And there's cross-buy and cross-play with some games as well. Now, the cons. There's a lack of support from Sony and AAA devs. The proprietary memory cards are way too expensive. There's little or no shelf space dedicated to the system in stores outside of Japan. The downloads can be extremely slow, and the Vita has a questionable future. The good news for the PS Vita is that it has a solid user base in Japan and has a dedicated and sizable cult following elsewhere. There is still very notable support for the system by Japanese developers as well as indie devs around the world. It has a giant current library of games covering all genres, and we continue to see amazing and high-quality titles coming to the system, mostly in the form of niche Japanese titles as well as indies. No, we're not seeing much in the way of AAA dev titles, but honestly, I wouldn't buy most of those anyway. Even if all game development stopped for the Vita today, there are still plenty of games to keep even avid gamers busy for a long, long time. Now, if you want to present the 3DS as a contender to the Vita, you definitely have a good argument. I mean, the 3DS is an excellent system, and I own two of them. I like my new 3DS XL quite a lot. I mean, the Switch could also be a contender, though it has extremely few games at the moment. However, if you try to argue against the PS Vita using smartphones, sorry, I just don't think you've got a leg to stand on. Yes, newer smartphones can produce amazing visuals and audio, but smartphones are still not a replacement for a handheld gaming system. The vast majority of smartphone games are of relatively low to mediocre quality at best and offer an extremely limited experience. The lack of physical game controls just kills it for most attempts to make a serious deep gaming experience. On-screen gamepad controls are just plain garbage, period. Android controller peripherals present numerous problems with quality, compatibility, and portability. Smartphones can have decent time-wasting games, some are actually pretty good. But if you want a serious gaming experience akin to what you get on consoles, smartphones just don't cut it. The Vita does. Would buying a PS Vita be a good idea today? Well, absolutely. If you're thinking of grabbing a game system to take on the go, you can't go wrong with the Vita. It remains to this day my favorite handheld gaming system of all time, and I continue to play it on a regular basis. So, do you have a PS Vita, or have I convinced you to at least consider buying one? Let me know in the comments section below. I'm Fox with Foxio Games, and I'll see you guys next time.